speaking of another movie that I didn't know jack about, besides like a couple trailers. Kat and I and our friends went to go see The Wild Robot, the new DreamWorks animated picture, which just came out. So my background, my only knowledge of this film came from a couple of trailers. There was like 2 trailers. The first one I thought actually looked pretty interesting because it had no dialogue. It was all just these kind of interesting scenes of this robot going through the wilderness, and I really didn't know what was happening, but it seemed kind of intriguing and actually a little bit mysterious. Like, I feel like that could have been that was an actual good trailer. Dude, I hate so many trends of modern movie trailers. This one felt like that one was like really actually kind of interesting because I wanted to know more about it. And then the second one came out and I was like, wait, there's a lot of voice actors attached to this. There's like talking animals. And I immediately just, all of my interest was like, It was the same thing I had when I remember, was it Disney? Was it Pixar? I forget who did The Good Dinosaur. Do you remember The Good Dinosaur? When it had, like, the start of that trailer is all of these nighttime silhouetted shots of these dinosaurs on the night sky. This comet flies by. And I was like, for the first like 10, 15 seconds, I was like, oh, what? Like a dinosaur like nature movie? That looks cool. I feel like there hasn't really been one of those. Because Dinosaur, the movie, is awful. And then you see the actual design of the dinosaurs, and they're all just like soft, rounded Pixar flubby cartoon dinosaurs, and I was like, this. I had that same reaction to hearing the animals talk or seeing the animals talk in Wild Robot. But it came out recently, and Kat was like, I heard it was really good, and I was like, well, if you're taking me, I don't have a choice. So we went to go see it, and I'm not gonna lie, that shit went kind of nutty. That was kind of a really good movie. The Wild Robot, I would say, the closest comparison, it made me think of, like, this is DreamWorks' WALL-E. In a couple ways. That's a slightly dumb, bad comparison. But I think there is, like, the start of the movie has very little to no dialogue. Well, I would say only like essential dialogue. It's limit. I'll say limited. You know, people aren't having conversations. You know, there's a robot. Stuff happens with the robot. It's not a great comparison, actually, but I did really like it. I think this is a really good family movie and a really good, good for the family. It takes place. So for most of the movie, you don't really know like what time period this takes place in. It's like mostly like, okay, it's futuristic. You kind of find out later on that this isn't really important to the plot, so I don't mind like spoiling it. You find out later, just most of the movie takes place in the wilderness, but you do get a little bit of what the civilized world looks like, and it is a post-climate change world where there's just some cities that are underwater and stuff. There's like a shot of the Golden Gate Bridge and like the arches of the bridge, and then you look down a little further and the bridge itself is just submerged underwater, and it's like, okay, all right. It's not like a really big feature of the movie. It's just kind of a interesting part of the world. It's really not even that important to the plot or the characters or anything. And I guess I will mildly spoil it. I probably will fully spoil it. If you aren't interested in spoilers, I would say, yeah, I actually thought it was really good. Again, it's a good family movie, good for kids. Has a little bit more edge, just a little bit. It felt a little bit like an 80s kids movie, where it's not gory, it's not violent in a way that's like I guess, you might call it cartoon violence. Like, there's a little bit of slapstick. There is danger, and there is some amount of injury. But it's more so that they, like, acknowledge death and danger in much more realistic terms. The movie takes place mostly in the wilderness, and it is not like a sugar-coated version, like beautiful, idyllic, soft, fluffy forest critters version of the wilderness. The designs are like, soft and cuddly or whatever, but they they make no bones about the fact that these animals kill and eat each other. And that's just like normal and part of the world. Like, there's a fucking moment where there's this possum mother with all of her like little possum babies. And they have like a joke. There's a joke about how one of them dies off screen to like a violent predator attack. She goes like, yeah, I have seven kids. And then you hear like a roar and like, ah! And she just pauses for a second and she goes, 6 now. It's like, holy shit. They do reveal like in a minute later that it was just playing dead and the kid didn't actually die, but there's like a whole minute where I was like, did they just like kill a little baby animal off screen? And like, no, but that was part of it. And there's like a severed bird's head that a character holds up and you can see like a little bit of blood and it's there. And I liked that. It felt a little bit like it wasn't. I, as an adult, did not feel like I was being talked down to very much, which I think is that's why I say a family film. Because I felt like, is it a little on the nose? Yo, yeah, definitely. With certain thematic, there's certain just like the character's going to say the theme of the film now. Fine, okay, there's kids in the audience. Whatever. It can be a little bit saccharine at times. Fine, whatever. But generally, it did not feel like it was made to, like, entertain dumb kids. It felt like it was made because there was, like, an actual story and characters with relationships that were worth exploring. So I guess now I can talk about the actual content of the film. That's my overall positive reception review. If that interests you, if that kind of thing interests you, might very well like it. So the plot of The Wild Robot essentially this takes place in like some point in the future. And the main character is this robot who is named Roz. This is that's like a nickname that becomes her name because she's like a Roz Tech Unit or something like that. That's the company that makes her. She is a helper robot. She is meant to be bought by some family or something, or like multi-purpose robot laborer, essentially. And who can perform any task and is like this robotic multi-tool. The ship that is transporting her has some kind of an accident or something, and all the cargo drops out and spills out onto this island, this remote island that is all wilderness. And Roz activates. She's I think she's like the only one of the robots that completely survives in an intact state. And she gets up and she essentially starts her regular programming, but she has no people to interact with. So she goes and she starts looking for tasks to complete. She was made to complete tasks. So this ends up... So the first 10, 15, 20-ish minutes of this movie, I really enjoyed because there is basically no dialogue. The dialogue is her talking to forest creatures who can't understand her. It is only, I say essential dialogue in that it is only enough to like let you know what she's trying to do, and also it makes sense that a robot of her type would be speaking. Right? It makes sense. It's not because what I find unknown. I guess that could kind of, I'll talk about it in a minute, but I don't like it when it's like, I remember when we watched Disney's Dinosaur, it was like, it feels like the dinosaurs, this might have even been confirmed at some point, the dinosaurs were supposed to be silent, and then someone went, you gotta make the animals talk because dumb kids can't handle a movie with no dialogue. It did not feel like that in this movie, is what I'll say. The first, 20 minutes of this film are all action. And by action, I mean, doing stuff and things happening. Roz is just wandering around the forest, trying to find tasks to do, failing, not knowing what's going on, and getting completely fucked up constantly. This fucking robot, man, I felt so bad for her, just getting its ass kicked by all the forest creatures, just falling down hills and getting smashed and scratched up and attacked by a bear and just completely fucked up. I felt so bad. I was like, let this robot get 1 W, please. She ends up going into this standby, learning mode, I think she calls it, which allows her to learn the language of the forest creatures, animals, which is interesting because it kind of implies that human beings would be able to do that with, they have the technology exists. So do people talk to animals? I wonder? I don't know. It's kind of just a conceit of the film to say, here's how they talk, the characters are able to talk to each other. So I mentioned that it is it does not feel like we had to make them talk for the child audience. I was worried about that, but I think it does justify it by the character things that happen in the film and the kind of story that it's trying to tell. Number one, I think works best. So it's kind of like problem solving. Number one, I see why this was done with a robot and animals and not a robot and people, because I don't know if it would have worked with people, especially in a futuristic setting. To have two things which are foreign to human beings, I guess, animals probably less so, but something that is non-human, something inhuman, I think is actually kind of important to the themes of the film. And two, the kind of story and the character development that it wants to convey, dialogue is kind of necessary. Could it have been conveyed through just motion? Maybe, but I see why they went with dialogue, and fine. Okay. It justified me on it. It's fine. It won me over on that end where I'm okay with it. Do I think a movie about a robot in the wilderness with no dialogue the whole time would be cool? Yeah, but whatever. Anyway, so she starts talking to the animals and still has absolutely no luck. Basically, the only benefit that it makes to her, that learning the animal language, is just that now she knows that they call her a monster, which is funny. So she ends up accidentally, after getting into another scuffle, she ends up accidentally destroying and killing this entire family of birds by landing on their nest, except for one single egg. There's one egg that she doesn't really know what to do with. The egg hatches, and it's a little gosling, it's a little baby goose. It imprints on her. So now it basically thinks that that's her mother. So Roz has no idea what to do. She honestly doesn't even... She just kind of walks away, and the duck, the little gosling, starts following her. She ends up talking to this opossum mama, and the opossum says, Raz is basically what should I do? It's asking the possum for advice on how to fucking stop this baby from following her around. And the possum's well, you just gotta raise it. And she's oh, task acquired. So now her goal is essentially, she is I'm mom now. I'm a mom now. So there's a couple things going on in the film. Number one, I think that one of the biggest motifs or elements of the film is the relationships between parents and children who come from very different backgrounds. There's definitely an element of like an adopted parent and a child in here, where Roz is essentially the adopted mother of this baby, who they end up calling Bright Bill. She collaborates with this fox named Fink, who is kind of like a scoundrel and who no one on the island likes. He's kind of a loner, and he just sort of fends for himself. And he starts essentially helping Roz out because Roz is actually... He realizes that Roz is super useful for getting him food and can just provide for him. He's like, oh shit, she'll just do anything. All right, yeah, I'll just... Hey, cook up these clams for me. So they kind of end up forming this weird family unit where Fink tries to give her... Fink, who himself admits that he had essentially abusive parents. He talks about his mom just like fucking... His mom taught him to swim by just throwing him into the water and stuff like that, and essentially kind of mistreated him. Which probably partially explains why he's okay with not being around other animals, because he doesn't feel a lot of need for companionship. So there's these three characters who have kind of these sort of interesting conditions. Roz, who is a robot who knows basically nothing. She is learning everything about the world for the first time. She knows about like human society because that's what she was trained to serve, but practically nothing about the wilderness or like what does a goose like? What do they eat? What do they need to survive? How do you teach a goose to fly? How do you teach them to swim? How do you give them shelter? Like what do they need? What are the lessons that they need? And she's just kind of, that's the parenthood thing, is she's just kind of figuring out as she goes along. So she's just almost like, she's so different from anything else in the environment. She's like this complete outsider with no knowledge. Fink is this sort of... He's not like a bad person. He's just kind of a jerk and a loner. But he kind of enjoys... At first, he's in this weird arrangement just for personal gain, but he kind of starts to enjoy it for companionship's sake. And then Bright Bill, who is like this innocent child who is just thrown into this weird situation where he's being raised by a robot and a fox. And I was like, they have a thing where Bright Bill like grows up and he walks around and he's talking like a robot. And he's literally like, he acts like he takes after Roz with like the way that he moves and like... Like acquiring information about a strange animal or whatever. And I was like, oh man, like she raised it. It's like, this isn't even a joke, but it is like someone who was like very autistic raised a non-autistic kid, and the kid just took after their parent. I don't know, like that is kind of was like the vibe it kind of gave off for me. Bright Bill also has this issue where he's a runt. He's the runt of the litter and probably would have died if it wasn't for Roz. So there's this... The relationships between the characters was... I don't know if I'd say it was anything groundbreaking, but they were unique enough that I liked the way that they developed. And the sorts of conflicts that it created, as, you know, Bright Bill isn't accepted with the other geese. He isn't even raised by a goose. He doesn't... It's kind of funny, but, like, there's a moment where he finds out that Roz isn't his real mother. And he's like, what? Oh, dude, I should have known. What the fuck? And that, like, creates a weird... Like, he doesn't know how to handle that, and he's kind of upset that, like, they didn't tell him. And... what's interesting about this movie is that it's really in thirds. I'd say the first third is like the beginning segment where, up to like until I'd say the moment that Bright Bill kind of grows up and you get like a quick montage. That's like kind of the second third of the film, which is where it turns into what I would say is like, so the first third I would say was a pretty interesting, like, okay, I'm curious where this will go. The middle segment is like, I would say a pretty standard family film. And it's probably what you've seen if you watched any of the trailers. It's the whole thing about they have to teach Bright Bill to fly before he has to learn how to fly by fall because they have to do their migration. The geese have to migrate, and so they have to find a way for two non-flying animals, two flightless animals, to teach a goose how to fly. And I would say it's like a pretty standard, acceptable family picture. A little schmaltzy again, but like, okay. And there's a point where that plot line is like resolved. And it ends, and everyone's happy, and it's like, great. And I was like, this movie seems kind of short. Like, I feel like it's only been an hour or so, maybe a little more, maybe a little over an hour. And then the movie keeps going for another like 40 minutes or 45 minutes. And it like, I was feeling like a little like, okay, I mean, if it ends here, fine, whatever. I would have given it like a fine. And then it keeps going, and the story keeps going, and it doesn't end at just like, oh, he made the migration. There's like this whole last, I don't know how to describe, like last leg of the film that like brings everything back full circle. And it turns into like a really good movie. It goes from like an interesting movie to like a fine movie to like a really good movie. I thought. I guess I can talk about it. It's like what's the order of events that happens? Because there's almost like two different plot lines of during the winter while they're away. Bright Bill has to do this thing where like they have to stop. They have to make an emergency stop in a storm, and they stop in this like dome bubble city that humans are living in now, where they have this big agrarian section with all these crops, and they're not supposed to be there, so they're kind of like trying to keep hidden. Bright Bill sees one of the Roz units. He sees one of the other robots, and he thinks that it's his mom. And he's like, what the fuck? And he gets caught. Everyone, they start like, we got to kill these fucking geese. We got to get them out. We got to exterminate them because they're going to contaminate the crops. And then but he knows, well, they're just trying to like pick them up and probably just move them somewhere. But because Bright Bill knows that they are not designed to do any harm to any living things, he's the only one who's able to stay calm. And it's like, oh, cool. So because of his unique background and his willingness now to the way that he's like open to like understanding everyone else is fearful. All they've done is live among other geese their whole lives. Bright Bill knows that the robots work a certain way because of his mom, and his experiences with other people give him like this kind of skill. This character quality that lets him like lead the flock safely and kind of like take control of the situation. Meanwhile, Roz, who was planning on going back home and sending out a distress beacon to get like picked back up, decides that she needs to stay for the whole winter because she needs to know that Bright Bill survived and that he's going to make it back to the island when the winter is over. And the storm is awful. It's like the worst snow they've ever had, and a bunch of animals are dying. And so she and Fink take it upon themselves to literally like save all of these animals from freezing to death in the cold. And there's this whole thing about, the two of them have essentially been shunned because no one likes Fink, and everyone thinks Roz is like this big robot monster. But they they are bigger than that, and they don't hold spite for them. Well, Fink does a little bit, but but he's like, fine, I'll do it. And Roz believes in helping people, and she is altruistic enough that even though you put all of these predators and prey together in like one little shelter that they've built, all of them decide to call a truce until the snow is over. And they take after her example. And it's about cooperation and cooperation over competition, I would say, over conflict. And I was like, oh, that's kind of nice. It's like a nice way to wrap up and then it keeps going, and there's like this whole crazy thing about fucking robot manufacturers coming to take her. It's like this whole climax of the film happens, and the really neat thing about it is that it starts out, it's a really, I want to say, now that I think about it, very elegantly written script, because there's all of these little components and characters, and the movie has almost like 2 or 3 arcs where the theme, so these characters have certain qualities, right? And there is a lesson and a theme to be learned from them. And the movie takes that and develops it and then keeps developing it to like add more stuff. And it never really feels like it loses sight of what the movie's about. At its core, the movie always feels, after like the first act of like establishing everything, the movie consistently feels like it always hangs on to the theme of what would I say is the main theme? You could probably say there's like a couple themes, because it's a surprisingly layered film, I think, in that sense. Helping other people and cooperating with other people and understanding them leads to the best possible outcome for everyone. That is, I would say, is the broadest theme of the film. And it never really stops being about that, starting from this small scale of like these 2 characters, then these 3 characters, and then gradually widening that to a larger like social setting of like, here's the flock of geese, and showing multiple ways. It's not just like pointing at you and saying you should be friends with people. It's showing multiple ways in which like that mindset of cooperation makes people better to solve problems that no one else, people who were more exclusionary, wouldn't have been able to. And it just kind of keeps fleshing the theme out and developing it as it goes along. And by the end, it was very satisfying. I thought it was a really good movie. Yeah, I really liked it. Really cool. Big win for DreamWorks. I would definitely recommend. I think your kids would like it. I know I have an older audience. If you are into animation, it's a pretty well animated film. The nature stuff is really nice. I liked that. Yeah, I'd say this is I feel like this is a real, I think this one is going to stick around. I think this one has some staying power. DreamWorks has been kind of on a, what did they put out? They did, because I was going to say, I was also very positive on, the Puss in Boots 2, Pussy Boots. They're making Dog Man next year, which is based on some like Jeff Kinney book that Kat said she liked a lot. Filmography. Show me the. Oh, here's the timeline. Yeah, what have they made in like the last couple years? Well, not everything is like amazing. They made the Trolls movie. But they've actually been putting out. I don't know. What is Orion in the Dark? I have no idea what that is. What is Gabby's Dollhouse the movie? I don't know what the hell is. I don't know what this is going on. But hey, they've had some. I mean, not everything. But recently, I think they've been putting out some pretty good family movies. So yeah, I would recommend The Wild Robot.